The Tailor's Shop Before Christmas, 1960. Hello, welcome to Back Then with Ban, bringing you into the past. Feel relaxed and get ready for sleep. H.E. Bell, above Goldberg's tailor shop, jingled like a distant sleigh as the first December snowflakes dusted Chicago's Division Street. Inside, the air hung thick with the scent of steaming wool and the honeyed tang of Mrs. Goldberg's mandelbread cooling in the back room. 16-year-old Danny Rubin stomped snow from his boots onto the mat, the one that still read, "Welcome," in Yiddish despite the neighborhood changing around them, and rubbed his chapped hands together. The shop window behind him glowed with its annual Christmas display. Not tinsel or plastic Santas like the department stores, but a single navy blue suit posed elegantly on a dress form, its lapel pinned with a sprig of real holly. "You're late," Mr. Goldberg muttered around a mouthful of pins, his stooped shoulders hallowed by the green glass lamp above the Singer machine. He didn't look up from the cuff he was hemming for Father O'Reilly's midnight mass vestments, another secret job for a priest who didn't want his parish knowing he used a Jewish tailor. Danny shrugged off his varsity jacket, the Lincoln High lettering fraying at the edges, and reached for the broom. As he swept threads into the dustpan, his knee bumped the button box on the floor, sending pearlescent discs skittering. One rolled beneath the velvet curtains, separating the shop from the back, where the real magic happened. Danny froze. He'd never been allowed behind those curtains. Not in 3 years of after-school work. Not since the winter his dad left, when Mr. Goldberg had taken him in for character building, labor instead of letting him run wild like the other fatherless boys. A wheezy chuckle came from the shadows. "New? You gonna stare all day, or fetch it?" Mr. Goldberg's voice was lighter now, almost teasing. Danny hesitated. Beyond the curtain, he could hear the snick-snick of shears, too rhythmic to be human, and a smell like struck matches. The old tailor sighed, setting down his pincushion. "What you think's back there, Danny? Monsters? Treasure?" His knobby finger pointed to the mezuzah nailed crookedly by the door. "Only thing hiding here is stories." He winked, and for a second, Danny saw the man he must have been in Warsaw before the war. Quick-handed, sharp-eyed, the kind of tailor who could stitch a man's future into a suit lining if he liked you. The moment broke when the shop phone rang, shrill as a fire alarm. Mr. Goldberg shuffled to answer it, his slippers whispering against the floorboards worn smooth by 50 years of pacing. Danny stared at the swaying curtain. The button glinted just beyond reach, catching the light like a dare. Danny's fingers brushed the velvet curtain just as the overhead radio crackled with the opening chords of the Christmas song. Nat King Cole's velvet voice warping through the shop's ancient Philco. The fabric whispered against his skin like a held breath. And suddenly he was through, blinking in the back room's eerie amber light. The space wasn't larger than a closet, yet somehow held a universe. Bolts of fabric stacked to the ceiling, their tags fluttering in languages Danny didn't recognize. An iron stove glowing cherry red despite no fire in its belly. And above it all, floating in midair like some divine mistake. Mr. Goldberg's silver shears snipping away at nothing. The blades moved with purpose, carving shapes from empty space that fell as snowflake-patterned shadows onto the work table below. Danny's stolen button, now clutched in his sweating palm, burned suddenly, searing his skin with the scent of ozone and old books. He gasped, dropping it, and the moment it hit the floorboards, the shears stilled. A scrap of shadow fluttered down, landing atop the button. Danny lifted the blackened fabric scrap with trembling fingers and nearly screamed. There, in perfect stitchwork, was his own face, aged 40 years, eyes hollow with regrets he hadn't lived yet. Footsteps creaked behind him. So, Mr. Goldberg sighed, his yellowed apron smudged with something that looked suspiciously like golden thread. Now you know why we don't let nosy punks back here. He snatched the shadow portrait, crumpled it, and tossed it into the stove where it hissed like a living thing. Outside, the bells of Holy Name Cathedral began tolling noon, each chime making the floating shears shiver like compass needles. Danny backed toward the curtain, but the old tailor blocked his path, holding up 3 spools, one black, one white, one impossibly red. "Since you're here," he said, grinning for the first time in Danny's memory, "help me decide which thread to use for the suit in the window. The last boy who touched that button? We used black for his funeral vest." The radio switched to Brenda Lee wailing, "Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree," the jaunty melody clashing horribly with the drip-drip of wax from a candle that wasn't there moments ago. The oven door slammed shut with a sound like a judge's gavel, making Danny jump. Mrs. Goldberg emerged from the kitchenette, her floral apron dusted with flour and something that glittered suspiciously, carrying a tray of mandelbrot still steaming from the oven. "Eat," she commanded, thrusting a piece at Danny. The almond-studded biscuit burned his fingers, but froze his blood when he saw the Hebrew letter that had baked itself into the crust. Ahay, the sacred breath of life, according to Rabbi Loenthal's Sunday school lessons. Mr. Goldberg snorted, snatching the black thread spool from the table. "Don't look so scared, boy chick. The bread only shows truth to those who need it." Danny's teeth sank into the cookie, and suddenly his mouth filled with the taste of wet wool and gasoline, the exact smell of his father's peacoat when he'd hugged him goodbye at the Greyhound station 3 winters ago. He gagged, but Mrs. Goldberg's knobby fingers gripped his chin, forcing him to meet her eyes that were suddenly, impossibly younger. The cataracts peeled back to reveal the fiery gaze of the woman who'd outrun the Nazis. "The suit in the window," she whispered, her breath smelling of anise and attic dust, "was your Tata's." Outside, a car backfired, and the radio switched to static, but Danny could still hear the snip, snip, snip of the floating shears cutting a new shape from the shadows, a shape that looked like a bus ticket to Indianapolis. Mr. Goldberg yanked open the shop's bottom drawer, revealing a ledger filled with names in rust-colored ink. His fingernail, blackened with some substance that wasn't thread dye, stopped halfway down the page. "See for yourself," he growled. There, between O'Reilly P. and Petrovsky M. stood his father's name. Reuben J. Navy Surge. December 24, 1958, paid in full. The last 3 words were crossed out with what Danny prayed was just red thread. Somewhere in the walls, the shop's ancient pipes began groaning like a man drowning in memories, and the holly on the window display suit withered instantly black. The ledger page trembled in Danny's hands as the shop's single bare bulb began swinging, casting spiderweb shadows across the walls. Mr. Goldberg snatched the book back with surprising speed, his yellowed thumbnail covering the rust-colored smear across his father's name. "Payment delayed isn't payment denied," he muttered, slamming the ledger shut with a puff of black silk dust that made Danny sneeze. Mrs. Goldberg clicked her tongue, wiping flour-covered hands on an apron embroidered with strange constellations that Danny suddenly realized were moving, their thread shifting like real stars across the fabric. The radio static broke into a choir singing, "Oh come, Emmanuel," just as the temperature dropped enough to see their breath. "You think we wanted this?" Mrs. Goldberg gestured to the navy suit in the window, its sleeves now visibly frayed at the cuffs. "Your tata came Christmas Eve, 58, with his pockets full of dreams and his head full of foolishness." A gust of wind rattled the display window, and Danny watched in horror as the suit's trousers filled with invisible legs, taking 2 shuffling steps toward the glass before collapsing again. The holly on its lapel crumbled to ash. Mr. Goldberg sighed, pulling a knife-sharp needle from behind his ear. He asked for a suit that would make him unforgettable. "So I stitched his best memories into the lining. Your first steps, your mother's laugh, even the taste of her challah." He threaded the needle with a strand of Danny's hair that had somehow found its way into his fingers. "But memories have weight, boychick. The more you carry." Outside, the snow turned suddenly gray as television static, and Danny's knees buckled as the scent of gasoline and wool became overpowering. Through the shop window, he saw the ghostly outline of a Greyhound bus materializing across the street, its destination sign blinking, Indianapolis, in letters that dripped like melted wax. Mrs. Goldberg caught Danny by the elbow, her grip strong as a sailor's. "The suit remembers the man," she whispered, "and tonight it wants to finish its journey." The shop's front door blew open with a howl of wind, scattering snowflakes that sizzled like bacon grease when they touched the floor. Danny wrenched free from Mrs. Goldberg's grip as the phantom bus outside revved its engine, a sound that shook the jars of buttons along the walls until they sang like a glass choir. Mr. Goldberg didn't move to close the door. Instead, he pressed the needle against Danny's palm, drawing single bead of blood that swirled black before turning gold. "Your father's memories are leaking," he said, catching the drop on the needle's tip, like stitches pulled too tight. The radio dial spun wildly past Perry Como and the Chipmunks before landing on a Yiddish folk song Danny recognized from his childhood, the one his father would hum while polishing his Sunday shoes with a handkerchief. Except now, the melody was playing backwards. Mrs. Goldberg yanked open the oven, revealing not cookies, but 7 miniature coffins carved from hollow dough, each steaming with that same gasoline wool stench. "Enough stories," she barked, slamming a rolling pin down on the table. "The suit needs finishing." The floating shears suddenly dove for Danny's hair, snipping a lock that turned to silver thread midair. Outside, the greyhound's doors hissed open. Through the snow, Danny saw a shadowy figure step down, a man in a navy suit with no face, just the imprint of a kiss stitched where lips should be. The figure raised one hand, showing a palm crisscrossed with the same scars Danny had from the time he'd grabbed Father O'Reilly's barbed wire fence on a dare. The shop's mezuzah burst into blue flames as Mrs. Goldberg whispered the terrible truth. "He didn't run away, Bubble. He's been unspooling since the moment he put on that suit." The holly on the display suit's lapel regrew suddenly, its berries bursting into tiny eyeballs that all blinked at Danny in unison. Danny's scream lodged in his throat as the faceless figure took its first shuffling step toward the shop, its polished Oxford shoes leaving ink-black footprints in the snow. The holly berries' tiny eyeballs rolled wildly in their sockets, their pupils dilating to show miniature reflections of Danny's father, not as he was at the Greyhound station, but younger, happier, stitching Danny's name into a Hanukkah dreidel with hands that hadn't yet learned to shake. Mrs. Goldberg slammed her rolling pin against the oven door, making the hollow coffins rattle. "The suit remembers too much," she hissed, grabbing Danny's wrist and pressing it against the navy fabric in the window display. The moment his skin touched the wool, Danny's vision exploded with someone else's memories. His father kneeling in this very shop on Christmas Eve '58, begging Mr. Goldberg for just one miracle, while emptying his pockets of 3 subway tokens, a baseball card, and a dried-out brisket sandwich. The vision shifted, needles moving on their own through midnight blue fabric, stitching not thread but strands of streetlight glow and winter breath into the lining. Mr. Goldberg's voice cut through the memory. "I warned him. A suit that remembers turns hungry." Outside, the figure was now at the shop's threshold, its stitched mouth peeling open to reveal not teeth, but rows of tiny silver thimbles. The radio switched to silent mid-carol, then emitted a high-pitched whine that shattered every light bulb in the shop except the green glass lamp above the Singer machine, which now burned with eerie blue gaslight. Danny tried to pull back, but the suit wouldn't release his hand. The wool had grown warm and damp against his palm, pulsing like a second heartbeat. Mrs. Goldberg began chanting in rapid Yiddish as the floating shears attacked the shadow portrait they'd made earlier, slicing it into confetti that swirled around the faceless figure in a mockery of snow. One scrap landed on Danny's tongue, and suddenly he tasted his father's last meal, egg salad on rye, undercut with a metallic tang of fear. The shop's clock struck midnight, though Danny knew it was only 4 p.m. With a final wrench, he broke free, stumbling backward into the button box. His elbow struck something cold and familiar, his father's 1956 World Series pocket watch, its cracked face showing the time forever stuck at 3:15. The moment his fingers closed around it, the faceless figure let out a sound that wasn't human, the screech of 1,000 ripping seams. The pocket watch's cracked face fogged over as Danny clutched it, its frozen hands trembling to life at 3:16 for the first time in 4 years. The faceless figure recoiled like a vampire from garlic, its thimble teeth chattering as the scent of Coney Island hot dogs suddenly filled the shop, salt air and fried onions cutting through the wool and gasoline stench. Mr. Goldberg lunged forward, his shears slicing the air where the figure's neck should be, but the blades passed through harmlessly, severing only threads of shadow that reknit instantly. "The watch!" Mrs. Goldberg shrieked, throwing a handful of poppy seeds from her apron pocket at the creature. The seeds stuck in its woolen face like buckshot, each one sprouting a tiny Hebrew letter that sizzled against the fabric. Danny's vision doubled. He was both in the shop and suddenly standing on a Coney Island boardwalk in July 1956, watching his father laugh as he balanced 2 dripping hot dogs in one hand while resetting the pocket watch with the other. The memory sharpened, his father whispering, "Perfect timing, Danile," just like Koufax's fastball, before tucking the watch into Danny's small hands. Back in the present, the figure convulsed, its suit sleeves splitting at the seams to reveal not arms, but swirling newsprint. Pages from the December 25, 1958 Chicago Tribune sporting the headline, "Local Man Vanishes from Greyhound Station." The shop's blue gaslight flickered, revealing the awful truth. The creature wasn't wearing the navy suit. It was the suit, hollowed out and walking, filled with nothing but lost time and newspaper obituaries. Mrs. Goldberg grabbed Danny's shoulder, her fingers leaving floury fingerprints that burned through his shirt. "It wants what your father left behind," she gasped as the creature's lapel holly berries sprouted needle-sharp thorns. Not the watch, the memory inside it. The radio burst back to life with a warped rendition of "I'll Be Home for Christmas," playing at half speed as the creature's thimble teeth elongated into silver sewing needles, all pointing hungrily at Danny's chest. The first needle tooth grazed Danny's collarbone, drawing a bead of blood that hovered midair like garnet thread before the suit creature inhaled it greedily. Instantly, the newspaper clippings inside its sleeves updated, new headlines screaming, "Reuben Boy Missing Too," in ink that smelled of Danny's own sweat and fear. Mrs. Goldberg's flower, fingerprints on his shoulder ignited into blue flames, forming the same constellation pattern from her apron. The burn didn't hurt. Instead, it seared away the shop's illusion, revealing the back wall wasn't wood, but a massive loom strung with what looked like human hair, each strand vibrating at a different frequency. Mr. Goldberg threw open the ledger book to a page Danny hadn't seen before, special commissions, payment terms, where his father's signature bled fresh ink after 4 dry years. He didn't just order a suit. The tailor rasped, slamming his palm over the contract's fine print. He ordered a second chance. The pocket watch in Danny's hand grew unbearably cold, its glass face frosting over to show a new scene. his father standing in this same shop on Christmas Eve '58, holding not the Navy suit, but a tiny replica made for a child, a perfect match for Danny's proportions that year. The creature wailed, its needle teeth retracting as the vision clarified. Danny's father had commissioned 2 suits, not one. One to carry his regrets, Mrs. Goldberg whispered, and one to. Her words cut off as the shop's front window shattered inward, spraying glass that transformed into frozen tears midair. Through the broken pane, the phantom Greyhound bus now idled directly outside, its doors gaping like a hungry mouth. The pocket watch chimed 3:17, and suddenly Danny understood. His father hadn't abandoned them. He'd stepped onto that bus, wearing Danny's matching suit, carrying both their memories in the woolen threads. The creature's holly berries burst, spraying acid green sap that ate holes in the ledger pages as it lunged for the watch, for the last memory it didn't own. The acid green sap sizzled through the ledger pages, revealing hidden text beneath. A recipe in spidery Yiddish calling for memories of fathers, 3 cups of lost time, and the unbroken thread between generations. Danny's fingers moved on their own, dipping into the viscous sap to trace the words, his skin burning as the formula imprinted itself directly into his flesh. The creature howled, its newsprint arms flailing as Mrs. Goldberg's constellation burns flared brighter, projecting ghostly Tailor's dummies around the shop, each wearing half-finished garments that pulsed like living things. One dummy sported a First Communion dress stitched with fragments of wedding veils. Another, a soldier's uniform woven from barbed wire and love letters. Mr. Goldberg grabbed Danny's wrist, pressing it against the child-sized suit vision in the pocket watch. He wore yours by mistake. The old tailor's breath smelled of burnt challah and regret as the truth unraveled. On that fateful Christmas Eve, Danny's father had grabbed the wrong suit in his hurry, the one meant to absorb a child's happy memories, not a man's regrets. The phantom bus outside revved its engine, its headlights illuminating the shop's back wall, where the massive loom's threads now vibrated in discord, half singing a lullaby, half screaming the Kaddish. Danny's blood still hovered between him and the creature, forming a glistening thread that connected to its chest like an umbilical cord. The creature's needle teeth retracted as it touched the thread, its form shuddering into something almost human. Just for a moment, Danny saw his father's face flicker beneath the wool, mouthing, "I'm sorry," before the pocket watch chimed 3:18. The sound shattered the vision, sending glass shards flying toward the creature's holly berries, now regrown and blinking with Danny's own blue eyes. Mrs. Goldberg began chanting the Shema as the shop's mezuzah glowed white-hot, its parchment scroll unfurling to reveal not Hebrew prayers, but a Greyhound ticket stub dated 24th December 1958. The creature's scream shook the remaining buttons from their jars as it lunged, not for Danny this time, but for the stub, its needle teeth elongating into silver railroad spikes. The silver railroad spiked teeth pierced the floating ticket stub with a sound like a steam whistle screaming through time. Instantly, the shop's walls peeled away like old wallpaper, revealing the Greyhound station as it existed on Christmas Eve 1958. Same cracked linoleum, same gum-stuck benches, but populated by ghostly travelers frozen mid-step. Danny's father stood vivid among the specters, clutching both suit boxes with shaking hands, his reflection warped in the station's rain-streaked windows. The creature, now more man than monster, let out a wet, rattling sob as the vision clarified. Jacob Rubin had realized his mistake the moment he'd boarded the Indianapolis bus, feeling the child-sized suit's magic pulling memories from his chest like taffy. Mr. Goldberg's voice cut through the memory. He tried to send it back. The pocket watch chimed 3:19, showing Danny's father ripping open the suit's lining as the bus pulled away, stuffing his own memories inside like a frantic confession. Baseball games and bedtime stories, all threaded with the bitter aftertaste of a debt he couldn't repay. The station lights flickered, revealing what the creature truly was. Not just the adult suit, but both garments fused together, their seams split by the force of mismatched magic. Mrs. Goldberg's constellation burns now blazed across Danny's chest, forming the same star pattern as the Chicago L-train map. Every intersection glowing where his father had taken him growing up. The creature's holly berry eyes rolled back, showing newspaper clippings from both their futures. Danny dropping out of Lincoln High in '63. Jacob's body found in an Indianapolis flophouse with a child's suit stitched to his skin like a second layer. The ledger's acid sap recipe flared crimson, its final ingredient now legible. The ungiven gift. With a shuddering gasp, Danny reached into his pocket and pulled out what he'd forgotten, a clumsily wrapped Hanukkah present from 1958, its paper yellowed, but still sealed. The moment it touched air, the creature's teeth retracted with a whimper, its form collapsing into two separate suits that lay empty on the floor, their lapels pinned with identical sprigs of withered holly. The Hanukkah gift's wax paper crinkled like distant firecrackers as Danny peeled it back, revealing a child's mittens, one navy blue, one Lincoln High gold, their stitches uneven where his father's hands had shaken with exhaustion. The moment Danny touched them, the separated suits on the floor levitated into a dance, sleeves intertwining like reunited lovers, as the shop filled with the scent of paraffin wax and latkes. Mrs. Goldberg gasped, her first true surprise, as the left mitten's thumb unspooled to reveal a tiny subway token from the Ravenswood line dated December 1958. The L-train map wasn't just memories, she whispered, pressing her flour-dusted fingers to Danny's constellation burns. It was the escape route he planned for you. The pocket watch chimed 3:20, its face now showing the Ravenswood platform at Christmas twilight. Empty, except for a small figure in a navy coat, too big for him, clutching a one-way ticket to O'Hare. Mr. Goldberg groaned, snapping his shears at the vision. Fool! The suits were never for him. They were anchors. The ledger's pages flipped wildly, landing on a spread that made Danny's stomach drop. Pair bond, father and son, payment, shared years. The holly sprigs on the suits burst into flame, their smoke forming the shape of the Indianapolis bus schedule, every departure time marked with a drop of Jacob's blood instead of ink. The right mitten began unknitting itself, its yarn snaking across the floor to the adult suit, rethreading its frayed cuffs with Danny's current height and weight. Outside, the phantom greyhound dissolved into snowflakes that stuck to the windows, each one containing a microscopic image of Danny's face at different ages. The shop's mezuzah cracked open, releasing not a prayer scroll but a child's crayon drawing of two stick figures holding hands outside Wrigley Field, dated 2 weeks before Jacob disappeared. In the corner, written in an adult's rushed hand, "For when I forget." The adult suit's collar turned toward the drawing and wept silver needles that clattered like dropped coins. The silver needles pooled like liquid mercury at Danny's feet, forming a miniature L train track that circled his shoes. With each revolution, the needles darkened to the exact rust brown of dried blood, the same shade staining the ledger's shared years entry. Mr. Goldberg knelt with a grunt, his fingers hovering over the tiny rails. "This isn't Chicago's track," he muttered. "It's the route your years took when he signed them away." The crayon drawing floated toward the child's suit, adhering to its chest like a second skin as the yarn from Danny's mitten continued reknitting the adult sleeves. Only now the stitches spelled out dates and locations in delicate Hebrew cursive. June 1954 Lincoln Park Zoo. September 1956 first day at Lincoln High. And most heartbreakingly, December 1960 should be graduating. The snowflake portraits on the windows began melting, each droplet sliding down to join the needle tracks with a hiss of steam. Mrs. Goldberg pressed her hands to the adult suit's shoulders, her voice breaking. Jacob didn't just give years. He gave the years you should have had together. The Ravenswood token embedded in the mitten pulsed like a heartbeat, projecting a new vision. Jacob standing on that platform, not to send Danny away, but to board the train himself, the child's suit hidden under his peacoat. The pocket watch chimed 3:21, its hands now moving backward as the suit's lapels sprouted fresh holly, this time with berries shaped like tiny alarm clocks. Danny's constellation burns flared hotter, searing through his shirt to reveal the awful truth. The star pattern wasn't Chicago's current map, but the 1943 Warsaw ghetto tram lines, superimposed over Lake Michigan. The adult suit suddenly stood upright, empty but imposing, its sleeves reaching for Danny with Jacob's wedding ring glinting in the cuff button. A sound like a distant train whistle filled the shop as the needle tracks rose into the air, forming a floating timeline that connected Danny's chest to the suit's hollow collar. Outside, the snow stopped midair. The radio crooned "Silent Night" in static-laced German as Mrs. Goldberg whispered the final horror. "He didn't forget you, Bubble." The suit made him remember too much. The child's suit buttons fastened themselves around Danny's throat with a sound like graveyard dirt hitting a coffin lid as the last timeline thread snapped taut between his heart and his father's wedding ring. The shop's gas lamps flared blue-white, illuminating what the magic had hidden. Thousands of hair-fine threads stretching from the loom's warp into the Chicago night, each one terminating at a different train passenger, their collars damp with the same ozone-scented sweat now beading on Danny's brow. Mrs. Goldberg pressed Jacob's severed finger to the child's suit's chest, her tears dissolving the crayon drawing to reveal its true layer. A 1943 ghetto manifest with Jacob's infant name Yaakov, not yet Americanized, circled in faded pencil beside the words, selected for transport, crossed out and replaced with paid in thread. The radio's static cleared to play a single phrase on loop. The debt comes due at the solstice midnight. Danny's constellation burns ignited in reverse, tracing not the Warsaw trams, but the exact path his father had walked from the Greyhound station to the tailor shop that last Christmas Eve, every step marked with a drop of that same rust-colored ink from the ledger. The pocket watch shattered, its gears arranging into a miniature train that raced along the floating timeline before derailing at December 24, 1958, the moment when both suits had briefly synchronized in the shop window before Jacob grabbed the wrong one. Mr. Goldberg collapsed at his loom, whispering, "Vase mir," as the child's suit's sleeves stitched themselves into Danny's skin with thread spun from his own veins, each puncture weaving a new memory. Jacob rocking infant Danny, while air raid sirens wailed in his nightmares. Jacob weeping over a tiny pair of shoes he couldn't afford. Jacob signing the ledger in ink mixed with Danny's baby teeth. Outside, the snow resumed falling upward as the shop's mezuzah crumbled to reveal its core. Not a prayer scroll, but a Greyhound ticket to Indianapolis dated tonight, stamped one way, no transfers. The adult suit's ashes coalesced into a final message on the floorboards. The suits don't preserve memories, they preserve choices. Danny reached for the ticket as the Goldbergs began chanting the Kaddish with their mouths sewn shut, their stitches bursting one by one as the child's suit's collar tightened around his throat, its holly berries finally blooming perfect red roses, the same flowers that had grown outside the Warsaw orphanage where the original fabric had been woven. The last thing Danny saw before the lights went out was the shop window, reflecting not his face, but his father's, alive and weeping as the clock struck true midnight. If you felt calm tonight, tap like, share this with a friend who needs rest, and subscribe to Back Then with Ben for more sleepy stories. Sweet dreams.